everybody. Welcome. Hello to the Zoom audience. We've got several people on, and it's great to see all of you. I know we had to reschedule, so I think this is a really good crowd for a reschedule. And so thank you for that. I want to welcome some of our new members who are either, and one might be on the Zoom. Nancy Van Dam. So I don't know who everybody is. So if you're here, raise your hand. Cheryl Doucette, who does watercolors, and Cheryl Downey does oils. Victoria Boziak and Kashmika Sarka. Kashmika is on the Zoom. And Claire Gordon is here. There's Claire, and she does watercolor. I just asked her. And Barbara Creamer, who's brand new. And we have some, and I welcome all of you. I see some very familiar faces, and it's great to see you all. I'm Naomi Wilsey. I'm the MC for the evening, and I'm happy to announce we have a new board member. So Denise Falvo, please stand. Is joining the board for membership, and we thank her. I want to mention the spring members exhibit. Some of you will be exhibiting. And so the call to art will be online like it was last fall. And it starts April 1st and the deadline is April 23rd. And all members are eligible. You can enter one. And if you enter, you're automatically in the exhibit. There are going to be cash prizes. And we'll have a judge for that named. Her name is Lisa Rogopoulos. And if you, I'm supposed to tell you the drop-off date is May 1st. So you have to enter by the 23rd of April, and then you drop off on May 1st. And if you have questions, that you can look it up in the next newsletter. We have a workshop coming up April 29th, and it's an all-day workshop. So it's oil and acrylics. You can sign up. There's sign-up sheets at the desk if you're interested. And I have information if you have questions. The other thing, we have a trip coming up to the MFA. So it's Hokusai, and this was just in the paper in the Wall Street Journal. This particular print went for $2.8 million. But it's a kind of familiar icon. It's an iconic print, and there's variations on this, but anyways, the Great Wave. And so it's a Hokusai exhibit at the MFA. We're going on the train, or you can just meet us there if you want to drive. So sign up for that with John Koger. Information's in the newsletter, which is on our website. I also want to announce Barbara Sawan. Barbara is going to have our first exhibit at the Senior Center in Dedham. This is a new location for us. We've been trying to get a location in Dedham for rotating exhibits, and this is the first one. And Barbara is going to be the first exhibiting solo artist. And the reason she gets to be first, there's two things. One, she had a solo show that she had hung at the Webster Bank, and then COVID lockdown happened. So nobody ever got to see her solo exhibit. So we thought she should get first dibs. Plus, she's coordinating the exhibit. So if you're interested in being a solo exhibitor, you can apply. So let Barbara know. And there'll also be opportunities for small group shows. So those will be coming up. Keep an eye out. I think there's a space for 10 to 15 paintings. So when is Barbara's show? It'll be for April and May. Thank you for asking, Jane. I forgot.
And we come in the lower level.
Yes. Yes.
It's all over to the hall.
Yeah. So whenever the Dedham Senior Center, which is in the town hall, is open, then that's when the exhibit is open. And Barbara's been doing great work. She retired from her floral business. And she's been painting all the time. They put in a hanging system, and we're going to be the first ones to use it. So yeah. So and the lighting is good. So if you have more questions, let Barbara know. Linda Mellon is here. Linda is here, and congratulations to Linda. She's our artist of the month. Linda is a active member, and she helped with our children's art project last summer. where we thought we'd have like 30 kids, and we had 99 kids. Well, it was free. Free babysitting, no, the kids liked it, the kids liked it. And we had fun, And she served on our nominating committee. So if you got a call from Linda, that's who Linda is. And thank you to all of you who have volunteered. We want to thank Catherine Perrone. Catherine's not here, but she's stepping down from the board. She's been on the board for a number of years and an active member. So we want to thank her, and we will recognize her at our end of the year soiree. The other thing, one more thing. The next demonstration will be next month in April. It's the first Tuesday of the month, and it is going to be watercolor. So we have oil tonight and watercolor next month. So who? Oh, Susan Lynn. And she's, do you happen to know Susan?
I do, yes.
Yeah. All right. And she's a great watercolor.
Rockport and has a gallery in Rockport now
Yeah,
too.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So any other questions? Jean, you're great. You keep me honest. Any other questions or special announcements? Okay. I'd like to introduce Julia Airoldi, and she has traveled a distance, and she was very graciously rescheduled from last week because of the weather. And she's been very active in the local art scene. She got her BFA from Mass College of Art. And she's been painting professionally since 2002. And I told her, she looks so young. She's represented in several galleries. She's an elected artist member of the Boston Guild of Painters, which is very impressive. And she's an elected member artist of the North Shore Art Association and the Rockport Art Association. She has over 20 years of teaching experiences. She does weekly classes and traveling workshops. So that's why she's going to be a great demonstrator. She's done a lot of teaching. We're going to go get started. I'm going to turn it over to Julie. All right. Let's welcome Julie.
Hello. Thank you guys so much for coming back out. I know this is being a reschedule with the snowstorm, and we weren't sure if it was going to be next November. And anyway, I'm so happy to see some familiar faces too. Awesome.
If you'd like to down Julie.
Nice surprise. And I also do pass my business cards around because I always forget to put them out. So we'll start with you. Yeah, if you want to sign up for my mailing list, I promise you I don't really do too many mailings a year. I might email a few things, but you won't get crazy blasts from me. So one thing I'll say about my process is mostly I'm an outdoors person. I love nature and traveling around, going to national parks, even local hikes. My whole family, we have 2 little kids, and my husband, we're really into it. And I'm mostly drawn to the light, whatever the light reveals. And so I think I wish I had 2 lifetimes to spend trying to figure it out, because it is an endless supply of inspiration. And especially I think on the East Coast, but I certainly love like the Southwest and the other places too. But I love the atmosphere here and sort of the veils of moisture that happen near the ocean, which is close to where I live now. But the other thing I would say about my process is that I mostly prefer to work in layers. So while I spend a lot of time outside, I mostly do, and I love painting outside, I work really small, and I sort of consider all of the work that I do outside as research and development. I always say my husband got to go, research and development. It's a very important part of the job. And so I work in several different mediums. I work in pastel, although I haven't in the last couple of years for some reason. I work in wash sometimes. Sometimes I'll do oil sketches on canvas or on paper. And I brought some of those sketches just so you can get an idea of the kind of thing I do outside. That's not to say that sometimes I won't go in and work on it a little bit, but I usually go to one location and just turn in different directions and do a bunch of small paintings. So that I could take all of those studies back, and my memories usually, especially for today, I'm going to paint a scene from last actually last fall. It looks very spring to me. And I think with the snow coming and thinking we were going to do the demo last week, I'm like, I'm going to will spring on by painting a field of flowers. So, I mean, I know if any of you paint from photographs at all or from life, you'll take these, you'll think that it looked fantastic while you were out there. You'll take a bunch of pictures and you'll get back to your studio and the pictures are very underwhelming. So if you have often, sometimes they're great, late light, but if you have a sketch, if you have, sometimes I'll do, if I don't have time, I'll sketch in pencil and I'll make, I don't know what I did with them now. I'll make little color charts that I can save in my sketchbook. So I'll mix a lot of the colors that I see, take the studies, take the photographs. If I have a good memory of what I've seen out there, reinforced by my sketches, then I'll paint it. If I don't have enough of a connection to what I'd seen, I'll keep searching, but I'm usually never at a loss for finding something that I'm interested in. So passion and excitement for what you're painting is so key. And that is something I have to constantly remind myself as I do this to make a living. And certain galleries, for those of you who are in galleries, know this, want the things that have already sold. And that's not the nature of who we are and what we do. But you know, you still need to buy the bread. So you do have to, finding the balance between what the galleries want. Occasionally you get a visionary who runs a gallery, and so it's not to diss galleries, but who wants to bring your collectors along with you. And that's like a dream gallery for that. So anyway, today I did do a little preparation because I did I often do a pre-demonstration to see if I can pull something off in the time that's allotted. So I will bring this out into the light at the end, but I'm gonna paint mostly from the painting that I already did rather than the photograph, although I brought that as an extra security. And are people interested in hearing more about materials to start? I often will start with what I work with first, and I can go through it pretty quickly. Most of the surfaces that I work on, like I already said, I do work on some oil papers outside, and also just primed linen. I use classes, mostly portrait and number 13 and number 15 oil, double oil prime sometimes. And I also have a lot of masonite boards for smaller sizes that sometimes I will prime over with Williamsburg oil primer and keep them around for class demonstrations and for other demonstrations that I use. And that's a really super nice surface. You want to put probably at least 2 coats on that sanding, light sanding in between. And I have to say, although I haven't taught since before COVID, my students, I used to drive crazy because I was constantly changing my methods. But I think that's what's so much fun about this, is experimenting and exploring. There's always another level, always. If people say, well, you've been doing this and you know what you're doing. I'm like, if I knew all of what I was doing, I would probably not do it. It's the exploration and experimentation that kind of keep me going. So I'm constantly, much to the, I guess, detriment of my students, changing up what the materials are. So I'm going to tell you these are my materials now. That doesn't mean next week I might pick up something and start working. I have some tried and true things like brushes. I don't really vary all that much. I found the ones that I like generally. So I use mostly silver brush Grand Prix, they're green handles. And I also use Treacle or Treacle, I don't know how you say it, but they're really a really great brush. I have tried rosemary brushes, and while they have some that are wonderful, these are my favorite. And I do tend to work, I use all shapes. I tend to use a lot of filberts, I think, because I like a lot of soft edges. I mostly work up from sort of a fuzzy, much like the Impressionists, a fuzzy-ish image to sort of more decisive, sharp edges and focus. I try to start with obviously the idea. What is it that drew me to the painting? And then I work out the design, and I think about the path I want to lead the viewer through my piece and where I want the eye to rest. So that wasn't materials, but that was just a side part of it. So those are mostly my brushes. I also buy a lot of those chip brushes you can get at hardware stores to tone a lot of my panels. I most often don't start white, but I'm going to do a wipeout method for this demonstration, so I left it white. And I do that a lot, especially if I'm working a large size, we'll work the whole scene out tonally. First, let that layer dry, and then I work in many layers. So just so you know, even the demonstration that I ended up going into it 3 times. I was trying to do it once, but I couldn't resist because I had an extra week with the snowstorm. As for paints, I'm kind of a little bit all over the place. I still use Utrecht, which was what I used when I was in college. I think they have some colors that are still pretty good quality. Earth tones are pretty universal across brands, so that's I save money with those. I use Gamblin paints, and I guess for the last couple of years I've been certain colors that I like in Williamsburg, which is a really nice consistency. And the medium that I'm currently using is Gamblin's Neo May Gilt, which feels kind of like a more traditional Marge medium, if anybody has ever used that. It doesn't tack up as quickly as like a liquid. If I need something to dry really fast, I use liquid, but I don't love it. It smells really strong. This doesn't seem to have as much of a strong smell. And I think that's pretty much it.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Tell me about the palette, because you have a way of putting your colors, which is kind of very interesting.
Oh, sure, of
When you
course.
prepare the palette.
Of course, I practiced for a long time with a very limited palette. So I'll talk about the colors, and then I'll talk to you about the strains that I've pre-mixed. I have a lot of security blanket colors today because it's a demonstration, but truly, if I were out in the field, I would really simplify it, mainly because I don't want to have to carry a lot of it. And also I want to eliminate as many of the times choice taking I want to eliminate some of the choices that are out there by simplifying it. Couple of brushes, couple of colors. So I'll use a warm and a cool of each primary white. I'm in love with earth tones. I can't help it. You can mix all those obviously with the primaries, but I do bring usually a tubed earth tone, usually transparent red oxide. I don't bring greens in the field, and I don't recommend tubed greens to any of my students because I think until they have a really good idea of how to mix a naturalistic range of them, the tubed greens can end up feeling a little garish.
Yeah.
Once you have a great handle on the greens, like any of the secondary colors too, a shortcut color is a fine thing to have too. The other earth tone I have is yellow ochre. So I have cad yellow light. I would eliminate one of these yellows. Probably this is a medium. I would eliminate that for being out if I was outside. Yellow ochre I always have. I threw in an Indian yellow. I was talking to somebody, it was Sheila, about mixing greens because they're such a challenge. And what I do, whether I'm painting in the studio, especially if I'm painting in the studio, but if I have enough time outside too, I will pre-mix some color strings, which sort of separates the part of the process for me and breaks it down where I'm really thinking about what is the shadow color that I'm seeing and what are the midtones, what are the light values, what's my lightest light. I'm really working it out in my mind before I even touch the canvas. Indian yellow is a color that's just I threw on there for today as an example of a really quick warm transparent color that I sometimes use if my pool of green gets too dull. I can warm it up quickly. I don't know if I'll end up using it today. I probably won't. But then in cad red light, alizarin permanent, ultramarine blue, cobalt blue. Those would be my staples. I do have a cold black on here because sometimes I use that as a shortcut for mixed with a little red.
Okay.
Yellow for my shadows, my cooler shadows. Anyway, so as you can see, I've pre-mixed some colors. This is not to say this is going to be the final palette of my painting, or that I won't take from those pools and mix new colors as well, but it gives me a place to start. I've already sort of thought about the important things, why am I painting this? Do I have a focal point? Oftentimes, I'll think about, well, how can I make it a clear resting place in my painting without batting people over the head. I love subtleties. I love subtle color and a subtle path. How do I keep people in the painting? So I think that's why generally my method of working from a soft, sort of all over at once method works towards my goals. So I hope that answered enough about my palette. Any other questions before I get started?
What was the green handle, the brand of the green handle brush?
That was Silver Brush Grand Prix.
Okay.
Yeah, you can get those from Dick Blick or Jerry's Artorama online too. So I do use some flats for drawing. As you can see, I have sketched out. So this is my painting. This is from a farm. And this is what I will be painting. This is a photograph.
Oh, yeah.
This is there you are.
Go right there.
This is from a photograph, and not a good photograph at that. But what I will tell you about the day is this is a farm not far from my new house, which I've lived there for a year now, but it's called Tender Crop Farm in Newburyport, for any of you who are familiar with that area. And they grow flowers for sale, fields of flowers for sale. They used to have, so depending on the season, it's a free for all for painters, really beautiful. And they have picnic tables sort of set up outside in the fields, and they have like a couple of animals, and they have some interesting buildings too. But anyway, so this was, and this willow tree, I just keep going back to. I've painted it many times. I just love the character of a willow tree. So for me, and while it's hard to.
This folds up quickly, so you can.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it's hard maybe to see the detail on camera, or even for people way in the back. I think one thing I've discovered, one thing I realize about anything that I paint really is I love reorganizing the pattern of whatever the scene is. So one, I'm simplifying it down to its more simple values, but I'm really interested in texture. I was a texture artist in the gaming industry a long time ago. So I am interested. I don't need people to be able to identify the plants that are in my paintings, but what's important to me is that the light effect feels authentic, that I can remember, that I painted as I remembered it, and that there's a mood or a feeling. Almost everything I paint, I'm really after a little bit of unless it's a practice run on something, but I'm after a mood and a feeling, not accuracy necessarily, and not trying to copy the photograph. I'm forever in pursuit of simplifying, because sometimes I totally go overboard. I used to be an illustrator, and so it's hard to shut off the detail. But really thinking the elements of, these sort of, they're almost like spheres that recede. How do I get this space? In the foreground, you can look into the plants. You can see some of the side planes. Obviously scale is going to help get you back into this. I see my focal point somewhere around here, which isn't a thing. It's really an edge, often a sharper edge, or sometimes it could be a focal point could be around the lightest light, highest contrast area usually forms the sharpest edge. That doesn't mean there aren't going to be, secondary sharp edges around it, but I see it somewhere around here. And I also, when I was working on this was a rainy day, and my daughter and I were walking around in the rain, and then the sun came out, and it was so vibrant that light streak back here really set off the whole field. And so keeping in mind, the sun is low, I'm always trying to identify where it is and what it's shining on. There's sort of an ambient light when it's almost below the horizon and there are clouds. So it's sort of, at the end of the day when it warms the clouds up, and there's this opening at the end of the day. It's like, oh. Anyway, that's the way that is. So I see, anytime you can have overlapping shapes, you can see all of these arches, shapes that move you back. I'm not so concerned with flowers and placing them exactly where they are right up front. Although I love the idea of, you know, leading us back with some of these brighter pink colors. So I'll probably add more in my pre-demo. I decided I wanted to have a little bit more color in the back as if it was a broader field. So, and I've eliminated, you know, I eliminated this. I change shapes as I go. You try to use it as a general guide, but really trying to keep my memory alive in the painting. So anyway, any other? I should go, so I have something to show. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I did sketch it out. I don't usually use charcoal, but I thought it would save me a little time. People don't usually want to see the line drawing and they just want to get right to paint. So I do start, what I'll do first is I will start by reinforcing the general shapes of my charcoal sketch. And I will move away for the folks that are on this side, especially, I'm probably blocking you, but I'll move over and show you at different points. If you have favorite places, which I'm sure we all do, or at least those of you who paint landscape, it's not a half bad idea to continuously go to that. You find a good, sometimes if I find a composition I like, or a place that just has all the comforts that I like of painting outside, I'll go back and paint it in all different seasons and different lighting conditions. So you have some of the questions answered in other paintings. But you can really focus on the mood or the season or the time of day. And working in series, I think, keep your paintings fresher towards the end of the series, I think, than in the beginning, too. So the reason I talk a lot about inspiration, idea, and design is because I think those are really important questions to answer up front in order to know which tools to use to accomplish that goal. You can do everything perfectly. You can have perfect color, perfect value, interesting scene, but if design isn't worked out and there isn't a place for the eye to rest, the whole thing kind of falls apart. So design is key, and you can never practice enough. And trying to simplify it down into maybe 5 values if you can. Value sketches are a great guide.
Jules, you using anything especially to sketch it in?
I did it a little bit just with turf. And I have a green earth out here, Rembrandt green earth, which is a shortcut color for today. I think I mixed it in my color pools over here, but so thinning it out in the beginning layers, not really thinking about shadows yet, just really thinking about shapes and which tools I need to get this to feel like there's deep space in a very small. So anyway, that's it. And then I pretty much will go over some further brushes and keep this pretty thin and pretty monochromatic to start. And I just want to get everything covered pretty quickly. Yeah. So might need like a lighter value to start, and I can work some darks back into it, some lights also back into it. another reason that I like to work in layers is just one, it works with my personality, but two, I also really love to see a variation of transparent and opaque areas. And for me, letting that first layer of transparent paint dry before really even going back into it, and then trying to hold on to it is key. I brought a few paintings. I'm just going to hold them up really quick, but I brought a few paintings just to sort of illustrate one that I thought was pretty successful that kept a lot of the underpainting showing through without going overboard with detail. And then the more opaque areas are where the light, so the light in the room physically catches a little bit more paint. I'm always trying to get more paint on my paintings, but that's another story for another day. So I thought this was a good example, and you can see it right over here. It's almost like really abstract. It holds together from a distance, but little passages are pretty abstract if you come up close. And I'll leave those over there when we're done, so you guys could have a closer look at it. And I also brought, I brought a couple other garden type paintings since we were in spring. I don't only paint gardens, but this one has a little bit of the transparent earth showing through as well. So some of it's underpainting. I tried the second layer I tried to go into. I don't know if you can see it at home, but I try to go into it second pass without recovering the whole thing. And my pre-demo for this class, I went very bold. It depends on my mood, but I just like the variation of texture and three-dimensionality you get by leaving thin areas with thick areas on top. It just feels more, I guess, true to life. You can look into shadows and the glinted parts of the scene catch the light. More paint seems conducive to getting that across. So I have to say, sometimes I don't go crazy with like thick paint all over. Or, right. The start is always the hard part, right? I am a scrubber at first, then I kind of slow down when I slow down the process a little bit. Really thinking about how the growth of these flowers are, they're really like almost like little shrubs, and you can see into the sides of them. So I really move my brush kind of around as I'm sometimes I'm not actually touching the surface. I'm just really trying to feel out the shape and texture of the scene. And I also try, I think this comes from being an illustrator for so long and choking up on my pencil, my colored pencils over my watercolors, and looking for detail. I try to hold my brush back far and work all over at once. Once I find myself obsessing, which I think most artists do at certain points, you're like, I just can't get this part right. Doesn't matter, move on. It's bothering you, move on to the rest. Get all the big parts working minimally in big shapes, simplified texture, and simplified color and value before going back in and honing more detail. I might end up darker just because it's a little darker in here, but we'll see how it goes. So using larger brushes to start and then slowly going smaller as I go too. Just trying to get things covered fast. Maybe one big green mass to start, which is okay.
Are you using Tarte with that?
I am, I'm just using Sharp right now. Some point I'll switch to medium. You are painting outside, but even if you're painting from a reference, I've definitely squint. Sort of see the big shapes, which I often have to remind myself to do. Just leaving a little bit of light area for some of the flowers that I like to put in, some of the flowers that are massed and bunched together. Some of these shadow lines in there. Go a little bit darker in the foreground. So people always ask what my style is, and I love the tonalists, but also love the impressionists. So I don't really know how, I never know really how to define it. Part of it is really, right at this point, it's getting a variation of values by one, thinning it, and two, sort of using more or less pressure with the brush. It might have made more sense to pre-tone it, but you have to approach it differently. So. Get a little bit more form on this willow here. Another thing about overcast days, I just want to make mention of is that it, for those of you who do paint outside or just look around outside and you think about just observing it, is that on overcast days, your colors are there's a broader range. In some ways, they're easier to see, of more vivid, not necessarily like a garish spring green, but the colors are truer to life on an overcast day. Also, right now we don't have any kind of a directional light on the scene, so this is the lightest light in the whole. I mean, minus maybe a light flower here and there, but I need to keep that in mind if I want the light effect to feel right, that there isn't any directional light really other than top down shining on this scene. So just really keeping in mind. Now what can I do also is we'll go in there and If I have enough paint on there, maybe I don't, let's see. So I will go in, are any of you familiar with subtractive method? I'm sure a few of you are, because I know a few of you. But lifting out, so I like trying to create some of the texture, especially in a field, so I'm not painting every leaf, I'm really painting the bunches of flowers, bunches of leaves. I can get a lot, sometimes I can get a lot more naturalistic looking texture if I wipe back to start. That's not to say in these lit areas that I'm gonna wipe out. Depends if I can wipe off on this one. I wouldn't go back in with lighter value and a variation of colors on top, but some of that texture, I can keep for the second layer and go back over it with a thin glaze to darken a value or unify an area. And I like that. You can use anything. I mean, sometimes I'll wrap the end of a brush to pull back something to pull out a color, or I'll use a Q-tip or saran wrap or just whatever works. Without making everything look too much the same all over. This is obviously more of an indirect method. Outside, I would do local color, sort of look, I would place local color probably everywhere. I mean, obviously there's a lot of green, but I'd probably put the red in right up front and the sky. Kind of reserving the sky in order to keep it the color clean. Also giving this smallest area here. Obviously, if this was oil paper, you wouldn't be able to wipe back. So if you want to do a subtractive technique, you have to have something that doesn't absorb everything and dry up right away. Be able to move it around, but it is important to step back. I can't really do it too much. See if things are starting to hold together, so I will step back a little bit. So there's a feeling of depth already with just a very simple, obviously monochromatic palette with the shapes. I have a feeling a little bit of the shapes here. Okay. This doesn't feel like a willow yet, but that's okay. It will. You think it does? Good. That's what counts. As long as the audience thinks it does. So just for the sake of demonstration, I will show you, you can also dip like the corner of a brush. You see, maybe around would work best. Dip the corner of a brush and chirp slightly, not so it's real super drippy. This is a good way of pulling out some individual flowers from the green start. Trying to hold too much at once here. Got it. Funny, I'm not actually looking at my painting, I'm looking more at my photograph, but I think because I know I painted it already, I have it in my head more than. You know, what is the pattern of the flowers in this, you know, I can see obviously the shrubs leading us back, but these pinks also lead us back. If there was another little stroke of pink back here, it would help to, oops, it would help to reinforce the area around the focal point. But also one thing I liked about the focal point in person, which you can't see here, is that the sun was setting somewhere over here where there was like a warm glow behind that opening of the willow tree. So I'd like to try to get that too. So I start out with a pretty solid shape. I can wipe back into that as well. Make sure I have that opening there. It's really the idea of willow, not necessarily that willow. Right? A little too small, but. I don't even really know what kind of flowers. People always ask what kind of flowers they are. I don't really know, but I've looked closely enough at them to know that they're not just straight up everywhere. There's little buds coming around. So I'm trying to thinking about that even now in this very simplified state, how they grow and not so concerned with their exact placement, just as it relates to the composition. Really back and forth between. So that's probably enough. See, obviously this wall needs to get a lot, not wall, but this bank of trees in front of the willow need just to get darker in value than any of the sort of general flat planes. So that's the next place for me to go. Start to feel out that structure a little bit more. Well, that holds together a little bit better now. At this point, I'll start going in with a little more color variety. I'm not too concerned about getting any of the pinks and reds in there yet.
What do you have on your mind?
I have like it's kind of hard to see actually in here, but it's a cooler green, so leans a little bit more towards blue. If I put too dark of a value back here though, it's gonna pull everything forward, so I think it. Depending on how much medium I have mixed into it, it was coming out lazy dark. Now, it has a little bit of a violet tinge to it. Always trying to figure out, I haven't gotten there yet, but just something to know why I'm using this color in the shadows. One, because I did see it back in there when I was there, but also I'm trying to relate the blue in the sky, which isn't from this photograph, you're not really seeing the color relation. If you were in relationship, if you were there in person, you would see there was a little bit more of that sky shining down on some of the shiny leaves. And so some of the lighter values of leaves that are facing upward to the sky are going to catch that color. So you would see that. And also like, just even if you don't see it, where can I put that? Where else can I put that color or a value variation of that color in a different value? And that's another reason why I do pre-mixing, because often if there's a lot of green in the scene, I'll start with one mid-value green pool. And from that, I'll take my palette knife and divide it up and make other variations: warm, cool, light, mid, bluer, redder, and so on. I end up using 1,000 brushes. I don't know if I'm the only one. I try to keep, I'm just not organized enough to have like, these are all my green brushes, and I try, but by the end it's a big heap of brushes. So don't try to make sense of this, because there isn't any sense to be made, I don't think. Okay, so I would like to go in with a little bit more shadowing to get a little better form on these bushes before I add any pinks and sky in there. Carving back into the shadows lightly, almost scraping the surface a little bit in some areas. I'm trying to add to the texture and form. Start using the medium too. Can always wipe back out. It's all, as long as it's wet, I can always add a little. If I see like some glaring shape or a line that looks too severe, I can always push and pull some of that out. Go back into it. All right, now I need to add, I think I should get my sky in there to start. That is the missing piece to the puzzle before I go into the next step. Get it covered first, then go back into it. So I have a few cool grays over here. One leans a little bit more towards yellow, one leans towards violet. And then I have, in order to sort of tie the pinks and the reds that are in the flowers into the sky, I have almost a peach line of light here of opening. There is a little bit of blue-green that I kind of like how I love how the peach sort of sets off that little strip of blue. So I am going to put that in there. You can't see that here, but I guess in the pre-demo you can see it a little bit. So like ideally I use a much bigger brush for this guy. And the one I grabbed. really keeping it thin until I know what I'm doing.
But you are using medium now.
I am using a little bit of medium, yeah. A little bit, I don't know if it's the light, but it looks a little bit grayer than, a little bit greener gray than I thought. One thing that's important though is everything is relative to what's surrounding it, so. Constantly comparing, you know, it's this. Value, lighter, darker, warmer, cooler. And so forth, yeah, so that's a very dark value to have right next to that tree, so we either need to get lighter in the sky or darker in the tree. And I think I need to get lighter in the sky, so. Because I think this is the tops of this tree, while it's, you can see the silhouette beautifully. If I go any darker, it's gonna be way too dark, so I need to go lighter in the sky. So my pre-mixture plan is already failing here. I mean, occasionally there are piles over there I never ever use. We'll see how many are over there that I don't end up using. But I think that's gonna be a little bit better. Yeah, and this Williamsburg oil primer is really lovely. If for those of you who use acrylic primer, if you haven't tried oil primer, it is a different feeling. I almost even like some of this dry brush effect you can get. It's not as slippery, so there's a better grab, and that's with 2 or 3 coats of the primer. I'm gonna make sure I don't go too close to the edge, because if it's framed and that top of that tree is touching the outside edge, it's gonna lead you right out of the painting. It won't feel right. So that was something I thought of post doing the pre-demo. That is too high and too close to the edge. So I'm doing it again over here. I just gotta keep in mind I want to lower that a little bit.
Does the oil primer help reduce sunken in areas?
Well,
Do you do a
yeah.
gloss varnish?
I don't love super glossy. I like something that's like a more of a satin. So I'll mix like a matte with a gloss and try to get something in between. I still have sunken in areas, especially with larger pieces when I'm working in layers, but I will oil out with whatever medium I'm doing. If I'm working something big, I mostly will oil out just the area I think I'm going to get to during the day, not the whole painting, with whatever medium I'm using. But yeah, really the farther I go on a painting, the fatter and the longer I want it to stay wet. So probably linseed. I do like a refined, I think I use a part, let me see here if I can get this right. 2 parts refined to 1 part stand to 1 part terp. And eventually I get rid of the terp if I need another layer on top. And the stand sort of, I'm sure you've used stand, but it sort of gives you that tack that you need to get a little bit extra texture. And it helps with the sunken in areas. I think having stand as 1 part of the mix keeps it shinier, but no, I'm always fighting sunken in patches.
I find matte is a safe way to do it.
Well, it is. I always used to paint on all of my varnishes too. I just like the look better. I hated the glitter you would get with the spray, but now for the sake of time and also not disturbing anything that's there, like a retouch spray sometimes is a good way to go. I know conservators will say that can disturb the layer if you do a retouch varnish, but oftentimes I don't have the paintings long enough to do a final coat, so that helps to unify it. And pre that, I might oil the whole thing out to help with the sunken in, but it depends. Those fatter areas of paint are going to end up different still. So it's hard. It's one of the Reasons I like wash too. Not have to worry about it with wash or pastel. And they're so much easier to photograph too. I don't always use turp in the block end. I think that contributes certainly to flatter areas. You know, and I never tried like quadruple priming it. Maybe if you did like 4 layers of oil primer, it would help cut down on the sunken end parts. Lots of white. It helps to change your paper towel around once in a while. You want to keep any kind of clean color. But I will wipe back a little bit here too for texture. Orange in this light. With sky holes or the holes that you see between anything, not just a tree, you typically want to tone down that value a little bit so you get a little bit more of that tunnel effect like you're looking through. I use the same color in the same value, but in the end, I think there's going to be much more paint there that'll pump that up. Also, when I bring the greens in, I'll sort of soften out and get some in between values where those sky holes are. But you know, asking yourself sort of how the light works behind this tree and how do you get it to feel 3-dimensional and airy like it really is. I mean, there's some denser areas obviously, but on the edge, they're lighter values. And you can see some of those dappled bits of light that are coming through different areas. Just change right a little bit. So bringing the light over to this side, even though I don't want it to be quite as bright. I'm starting out with it as bright. Horizon line. Just throwing a little bit up there. In the lighter portion of the clouds. And constantly forcing myself to move on. So like I got enough up there, even very thinly and without even cleaning a brush yet. I'm gonna go back down and get some of these, back down to the land and get some of the floral colors in there. At least in mass, I'm not gonna go crazy in individual flowers, but some of these bunched areas I'm gonna go in. But I'm gonna start out a little darker maybe than I will end up with. It's gonna read a little bit darker to start. Because I don't have a lot of green on there yet. of those, but those could be really handy too, to simplify, seeing the values. I suppose they could probably speed up seeing them. I'm always just constantly trying to simplify the values at first, so I should get one of those though. So I do walk around a lot more than I am tonight painting. And it's really good to, I mean, sometimes I'll go as far away as I can. Is it holding together from a distance? Because if you stand away, if I've gone way too far in detail, the big shapes fall apart. So I want it to look especially good from far away. I want it to hopefully entice somebody to walk up close. But ideally, I'd like a little bit of a distance on it to hold together. So that aids in that. And I can't remember what other questions people asked. Oh, about mediums. If anybody has questions, also post a demonstration. If they'd like to email me, just go to my website, which I think is out there somewhere. It's info@jcairoldi.com, and you just shoot me your question and I'll get back to you. So someone had a question about the certain mediums that I use, and I do switch it up a lot. I guess I'm always looking for the magic, the one that makes all of my paintings incredible. They're never all incredible. But we keep trying, you know. I guess right now the Neo Magilp, which is a couple of people asked me about that. It seems to aid in the sinking in, which is back to your question. And if not everybody knows what that means, sinking in, does some people, obviously the watercolorists wouldn't know that. So with oil paints, depending on the color, so like, for example, earth tones they have less oil in them, which is sort of traditionally why they were used in underpaintings. So they were considered leaner, less oil. They dry faster with less oil, right? And then you build up to your oilier whites. Something like white would have a lot of oil in it. Obviously, when you're painting, you don't want to have to be thinking about, I mean, you have a general idea of how you're layering it. You start by thinning it down like a watercolor, clearly. You can see that in my painting, and then building up to thicker paint and more medium at some point. Inevitably, though, if you work over time on a painting, parts of your painting are starting to set up and sink in and get flatter, shinier, patchier. Is that the right way you would explain it? So it's an uneven surface. And when certain strokes get or read flatter, they change in value. So when you go back in, like sometimes I'll go home happy with my days where I'll come back and I'll go, oh my God, it's hideous. What did I just do? And oftentimes it just needs to be oiled out. And when I say oiled out, taking whatever medium I'm working on, and I might not oil out the whole painting, but it's just rubbing a very thin coat or brushing a very thin coat of the medium over the area that I'm going to work on in order to give me enough of an idea of, phew, as I I oiled it out, and now I can see all the values as they were intended yesterday, but then they sunk in and got flat. That is a very frustrating thing for oil painters. And so I think I was talking to somebody on the break. I don't think it was as part of the demonstration that I most often will do that. Occasionally I'll use retouch varnish in between, but I think it makes your paintings a little less technically sound. So with oil paintings, in order to get them to last long, in case they end up in museums, right? Or in someone's, being passed down by generations, which we can always hope, right? You want them to last. So there's a certain way of layering them from lean, they call it from lean to fat. It's kind of confusing. It's not something that is dominantly on my mind while I'm painting. I'm mostly trying to get the feeling or the mood that I'm after. But it's good to keep it in the back of your mind. I don't think about it anymore. I think a long time ago, it took me a while to kind of get a general idea of at least how to do it. And then when I start or try a new medium, I try to read as much as I can about it. Some manufacturers don't put out all the information about how it's made, and that could be a little more questionable. What it'll do to your painting. So liquid, for example, which is an alkyd-based medium, which also is this Gamblin medium, Neo Magilp, has a cicative in it, which means it has a dryer, which speeds up the drying time, which is great if you want to work in layers. It makes the chemical layering of the painting, without getting too scientific, I guess, a little bit more complicated. So if I go over a fatter area of paint with oil in it, over it with alkyd, that top layer is drying faster than what's underneath it. So what's underneath it, even if it's dry to the touch, it's still expanding and contracting as it dries, can crack that top layer. And that's why in museums you see fine cracks in some paintings, and they have a lot of technology now to see how paintings were created, to give us the information and how to create them, and we just do the best we can. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it was a long-winded explanation of two things: oiling out, and what was the other thing?
Sinking in.
Sinking in. That's right. Oiling out, sinking in. All right. So anyway, back to it. How much time do I have?
About 15 more minutes.
Oh my God.
Just stretch.
All right, I'm not gonna be able to talk anymore. No. If we leave like 5 minutes at the end for questions, people can come up and I'll say and answer questions, but I better get cracking.
That's an instrument. This is barely a beginning.
That's why I always preface my demos with this. Well, fish painting, but it gives you a good idea of how I start almost all of my paintings.
No, it's not, because it's really, most people can't. Yeah. It's never been done, never been done. It's just been for purposes. No, but it's not. All ideas are presented.
Incidentally, medium is not necessary. It's sort of a personal preference. If you like to glaze, which is a transparent passage of paint over, like say I did a value under painting, I could second phase go in with transparent colors over, so that has to be thinned with something. So a medium over what's there to darken a certain area. Every time you put a glaze, it darkens the area, but also gives it this nice, lovely luminescent quality in theory. If you do it the right way. So anyway. You see, sometimes I'll leave like a little light line between shapes around it, like especially between the sky and the tree. I'll leave a little bit of raw canvas just so that I don't get mud while I'm working. At some point, I'll have to, work the edge back and forth. But that's why it is that way right now. Usually before I clean my brush, I figure out where else I can put that color, get most of the color off of the brush. Where else can you place that color? Where do you see it? We all have, I know I have the tendency anyway, to do what they call the tin soldier effect, which is making all this, oh, I love that shape. I think I'm gonna do it 5 more times next to it, but that does not, unless it's a fence, it's not really, or a perfectly manicured garden or a row of hedges, it just does not look naturalistic. So even if the shapes are too perfect in the actual scene, how do you make them different from each other? This one I want to be more airier, this one denser, this has a different form, the leaves curve down and you can see more twigs. Like, how do you, not necessarily detail, just how do you make the character more interesting between them? And there's so many parallels between music and painting. I often think of that. You have to reach for more paint. You can only spread paint so thinly. So I have to remind myself to reach more for more. Trying to spread it out too little.
Can you just come? That's better. What if we turn our easel on?
Blocking it too much. Blocking it too much, yeah.
That someone on the Zoom audience is saying they can't see what your brush is doing. What, would it bother you if we just turned your easel just a few inches
No,
at an
no.
angle, just to see
No, no,
it catch? And that way, when you're filming it, it's. That would, like turning it this way just a tiny bit, or would that not?
I'm not sure if that would help, but
I
anyways,
was thinking maybe, angling it differently.
I think it's where the camera is.
Oh, okay. Sorry, never mind. I didn't-
Okay.
There's the three things.
Should I put it
The
back?
canvas, you and the camera. We need to be in a triangle. And not in a line.
Oh,
All right, so maybe I need to move back and forth more.
I knew where it was.
I'm trying to hurry.
And we'll tell this person,
Sorry.
to come to the next meeting.
Sorry, no person,
Come in person.
sorry. I know it's hard to see it that way. It's hard to see it in some seats in person.
Yeah, I think that's better because now it's a little fuzzy.
Oh my, so my head is in front of it, basically. It's in front of the whole painting on the screen. Sorry, I don't know how to not do that. Maybe if I was sitting, maybe that's what someone wanted me to say. You. I'm sorry, I didn't even, I'm not look, I don't want to look up at the screen.
All right, now she should be able to.
Yeah. Get yourself a little stool.
I know.
You'll be exhausted from kneeling down.
Yeah, we should.
We don't want you to get exhausted.
I can, I'll do the, I'll do this.
Demonstrated that sat on.
I think that I just think it came up with this, I mean,
You're not gonna be.
I didn't, but
Because I don't understand what you mean. But I'm gonna write it down. That's why I thought it was an ocean.
it's the parents.
I think that's why I'm not really you don't know this gives you time. Were you able to pan the audience?
I did,
It was you were panning yours. Someone can buy the projector.
yeah. The Zoom person can do the camera. So you would have the camera, the Zoom, the Zoom, and doing the camera. Or keep the people seeing the cameras while doing it. This thing is trying to come to the point.
Yeah. Julie, I think it was very nice of you to do the practice and bring your practice too. So it's sort of like a cooking show where they. I started out.
It's a trick to talking and painting at the same time, which is why I always do a practice run because, they're different sides of the brain. So if I get it down in one version, at least I could say, see, I can paint even if the demo didn't work out.
You've got a lot of good examples.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to close. But I want to thank Julie and. Very welcome. Thank you guys. And since she's offered to answer follow-up questions that you might have, we can send out her website address again. It's in the March newsletter that Julie produces. So take a look there, her bio and her website around there. Thank you all for coming, and you can leave. I've gotten permission to leave the chairs here, so you don't have those chairs away today. So we'll see you next month. The April meeting, watercolor, Susan Lynn. Hope to see you soon.
Should we take any questions or is there no time now?
If
I know that
anybody
some
didn't get to
people- I know
answer,
that
you
Nora
ask a
wanted-
question during the break. You have one more chance before we turn out.
I can scream while I answer, because I know that Nora had a question. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
You look,
That-
you
that
look
was so-
safe from a painting.
Yeah, I think part of it is the color. It looks different on me and I'm looking more at form and I kind of have it in my head already sort of what I did with color. And also because I pre-mixed some of the general colors, but even in this lighting, they look different on the canvas. You know, so you can see it quite as dark anywhere, but with an overhead light, the values and the greens are closer together. So, you know, it's a very thin painting, but it's a start. Yeah. The plan was to look at that. I hope we got to see it.
Like Julia Childs.
It's too late to do that, but there was a free demo done.